right, this is a study of Proverbs, and if you're visiting with us, my name is Charles Plemons. If you're streaming along with us, we welcome you, and we have workbooks for anybody who is staying through the duration of the class. If you're just visiting with us and want worksheets for tonight, I've got those as well. And we're going to be starting section 7 tonight, so I don't believe most people would have those worksheets yet. So if you need a worksheet, raise your hand, and if I can get some people to help pass some of these out. Thank you. All right, so last week we were finishing up the section on friendship, and we'll do a little bit of review. We had some technical difficulties last week, but we're back in business tonight. So up on the screen here, we have a little bit of our review on some things you can do that risk losing friends. And Proverbs had quite a bit to say about that. Thank you, sir. So one of the things that can be a risk in friendship is involving business or money in your friendship. And remember, Proverbs gives us advice that is not always 100%. We know that there are exceptions to the rule, but many times we've seen situations where involving friendship with money or business ends the friendship. Not keeping information private. Your friend tells you something, you find out something about your friend or that your friend did, and you go and you tell others, then that causes problems. Being disloyal to a friend, betrayal, is one of the things we talked about that can end a friendship. And of course, neglecting a friendship. And we talked about that idea, absence makes the heart grow fonder and all that. Yeah, sometimes, but there's a lot of times you see when a friendship is separated by distance or just whatever reason they're not interacting with each other, excuse me, you see that friendship begin to fade. And then we closed the section last week giving that example of Jonathan and David and what good friends they were. And we saw that Jonathan was even willing to go against the wishes of his father to kind of enhance this friendship with David. And they were very, very close. So that brings us then now to another section of Proverbs. And Proverbs has a lot to say about this next part. And earlier, Miller and Nan were talking about how they didn't like this topic. And, some of us, I think we can agree with that. We're going to talk about the sin of laziness. This might cut a little close to home for some of us. So, laziness, we have to realize, is not something new. I think every generation that has come along, or at least generations that I've heard talk about how the next generation is the laziest generation ever. Well, if that just keeps going, if each generation thinks that about the next, man, when does it end? It just keeps getting worse and worse and worse, right? Maybe not. But this idea of laziness is something that we talk about a lot, and we talk about it in differences of generations a lot of times. Now, Proverbs has about 30 verses or so addressing laziness. So God definitely has things to say about this topic. Now, for a lot of us, things in our culture, in our lifestyle, can help make us lazy or lazier anyway. And some of it is just because of the conveniences of life. There's a lot of things that previous generations just absolutely had to do just to survive, and we don't have those struggles. And so that, in a way, makes us more prone to have more free time and maybe a less drive to get some of these things done. So some of the conveniences that might make us lazy. For most of us, we don't have cows to milk. Now, Neil being the obvious exception here. Chopping wood. I grew up chopping wood. We always had a wood-burning stove, but that's not really the thing anymore. There are plenty of people that still do it, but by and large, you don't see that happening all that much anymore. We have so many other ways to heat. Gardening. There's plenty of people who garden, but it's not like it used to be. Everybody used to have a garden. Everybody's out there and they're growing all these things. Now, that's really rare. Drive around in the city and look at yards. Which ones of them have gardens? Not a whole lot. Not a whole lot. Even washing dishes. Now, I'm not saying that people don't clean dishes, but we got dishwashers. And we also have these wonderful or terrible things, disposable dishware, right? Horrible on the environment, but man, it's easy to clean up. So just the conveniences of life changes the way we live and changes our attitude towards certain types of work. We also have an unprecedented number of distractions. Take your pick of distractions. For one, I've put on here climate control, and not that climate control is a distraction, but the fact that we have the ability to be very comfortably cool in here tonight, rather than the balmy 90-something degrees that it is outside, that encourages people to stay inside. When it's cold out, we have all kinds of heating. And so there's all these things that make it more comfortable for us. So climate control leads to distractions in a lot of cases. Television and movies, a huge bane of our culture, right? There's a lot of good things that come from television, but how many people just waste all kinds of time doing what? Watching TV. Are they doing anything else? Sometimes. But a lot of times, what do people do? They sit down and they just watch TV. I read a study not too long ago that said the average American spends 3 hours a day watching TV. How many hours are in the day? 24. How many of them are you awake? 16-ish. Yeah, 16. So 3 out of the 16 hours a day on average just watching TV. It's not very productive. Watching movies, online games, social media, the internet has given us tons of distractions. We have all kinds of ways to amuse ourselves. Books, e-readers, going to restaurants. A lot of people are distracted by eating. They would rather eat than do something productive. Not that eating is bad. And again, a lot of these things have good positive qualities, but many times people take things to extremes, and that leads to laziness. All these entertainment venues we have. There's so much in our society that is just calling for our attention and seeking to just get us to zone out, to just pay attention to whatever it is and not do anything more productive. Now, a big reason this is a problem is because, there's all kinds of work that we could be doing, labor that we could be doing, but the most important labor that we should be doing is God's work. And so when we get distracted by all of these things, it's taking time away from the idea of physical manual labor, yes, but it can also be pulling us away from that very important spiritual labor that we are supposed to do, which could involve very physical manual labor. For example, our sojourners here are very familiar with doing God's work through a lot of labor, and we're very thankful for that. So, any of us need to take note of the danger of laziness. It doesn't matter if you're young, you're old, what generation you're in, there are dangers to laziness, and laziness can creep up on us. So let's look and see what Scripture has to say. So first of all, we've got a section here I'm calling just avoiding work. And we need to recognize that laziness is a sin. Turn with me to Matthew 25 and verse 26. Matthew 25, 26. It says, "But his Lord answered and said to him, 'You wicked and lazy servant, you knew that I would reap where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed.'" So here we're looking at a parable. We've got an example of a lesson from God, and he's talking about servants and the kind of work that they should do. And here he calls out a wicked and lazy servant. The servant should have been doing work and wasn't. So we know this is a problem. So let's now look in Proverbs. Turn all the way back to chapter 6 of Proverbs, and let's just see some of the wisdom from the Old Testament on laziness. So there are many, many things that keep people from work. One of them would be too much sleep. Now, that can be physically sleeping too much, or it could also just be the love of sleep. You know, you may not actually be asleep, but you just can't get out of bed, or you won't get out of bed. So I know growing up, I was very much guilty of this. I remember one time my mother came in and dumped me out of bed and told me, "Don't come home till you have a job." And so I came home gainfully employed after that. So we hear stories about, people who they won't get up, they won't get going, and they don't want to get up and do things. Now, I'm not talking about medical issues and things like that. I'm talking about just this desire to sleep. Well, turn with me to Proverbs chapter 6, verses 9 through 11. Proverbs 6, 9 through 11. It says, "How long will you slumber, O sluggard? When will you rise from your sleep? A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep. So shall your poverty come on you like a prowler, and your need like an armed man." All right, so is Proverbs very complimentary of the sleeper here? No, what does it call them? Sluggard. Yeah, we don't use that term very much in today's society, but it doesn't sound positive, does it? How long will you slumber, O sluggard? And it's telling of some dangers here, which we're going to get to in a little more detail in a few minutes, but it's talking about this idea of sleeping. If you sleep too much, in verse 11, there's a little bit of warning here. What can happen to you if you sleep too much? Poverty. Yeah, if you're not working, you're not making income, poverty can come upon you, or your need like an armed man. So not just money, but this idea of doing whatever it takes to take care of ourselves and take care of our needs. All right, turn a few pages over, Proverbs 19. Oh, I didn't mean to push that. Proverbs 19:15 says, "Laziness casts one into a deep sleep, and an idle person will suffer hunger." So we've got a new term here. We're talking about lazy. It's also, we've now introduced this term idle. The person who just lets life pass them by. They're content doing as little as possible or nothing. And again, we have a warning here. What can happen? Lead to hunger. Why? Because you're not doing what you need to acquire whatever it is you need in life. Now, some people are enabled in this. There are people that will provide for them. I think as a kid, certainly that was a part of my problem. I didn't need to work. I didn't think. Mom told me otherwise, and I learned otherwise. But if you don't have your need, or if you're not taking care of providing for yourself, your needs may not be met. All right, turn a page over, Proverbs 20. Verse 13. Proverbs 20:13. It says, "Do not love sleep, lest you come to poverty. Open your eyes, and you will be satisfied with bread." So we have a warning, but also an encouragement. This idea of open your eyes, this is talking about if you're not asleep, if you're active, you're not idle, you're doing, what's going to happen? You're going to be satisfied with bread. You're going to get returns on your investment of activity. You know, this idea, not a spiritual sense of reaping what you sow, but a physical sense. If you are putting forth effort, you're going to see return on that effort. All right, and now my favorite one in this section, turn over a few pages, Proverbs 26 and 14. Proverbs 26 and verse 14. A few of you are snickering already. I love this one. As a door turns on its hinges, so does the lazy man on his bed. Once again, a not very complimentary picture that we're painting right here. So it's just talking about this idea of the lazy man just flopping, rolling back and forth, not really doing anything, just rolling like the door on the hinges.
Verse 15 is quite cute too. The lazy man is so lazy he can't even feed himself.
Can't even feed himself. Yeah, it's just too much work. Just too much work. Yeah, you know, so we see this same mindset carried forward, don't we? You know, we've got this foundation here that we're looking at Proverbs, and he's reiterating the same thing. You know, if you are not going to work, you are not going to get your provisions. You know, and this idea of demanding, you don't deserve it, right? You need to work. You need to put forth the effort. Now, again, we are talking about people who are making this choice for the wrong reasons. There are plenty of people that would work that can't due to various situations. It may be physical, it may be mental, it may be a social situation going on in their life or their family. You know, so please, please, please don't think we're trying to target with this wide net every scenario. We're talking about here the people who have just decided, you know what, I'm just not going to do. And there are plenty of people who make that decision. I'm just not gonna. I'm not going to work. All right.
2 Thessalonians 3:9 says that the man does not work, neither shall he eat. That's
right. Yeah. If you won't work, you won't eat. Absolutely. So we have one way of avoiding work is the people who are going to be sleeping too much. Also, related to it, and this goes back to a topic we talked about previously, talking too much. So this can be gossip. This can just be standing around talking. Now, you're probably thinking, well, how in the world are these two things related? Well, I want you to think back to maybe some jobs you've had or maybe jobs you've seen depicted on TV, and there's always that one person standing there at the water cooler, right? And they've already consumed who knows how many cups of water, and they've talked to everybody who's come by. And you know that they have a job. They're there for a reason. They should be doing something. But instead, what are they doing? Anything but. They're talking. They're just talking. And you might have the experience, if you don't have the water cooler, maybe there's that person that just comes around the office And when they get there, you're not going to be able to work for 15 or 20 minutes because you just can't get them to go on. But when they leave your office, where are they going? The next person's office. So they're avoiding work because they're just talking. Now, what are they talking about? Now, there's a difference between having a conversation about your work and what you need to be doing and just idle chatter. So this could be the person who's talking, going around in person. They could be on the phone all the time, or texting somebody, or even chatting on social media. Talking can get in the way of work. It's a form, in many cases, of laziness. So turn back a few pages now to Proverbs 14:23. Proverbs 14:23. And I think this will show how closely related these are. It says, "In all labor there is profit, but idle chatter leads only to poverty." Now, if you'll remember, in Proverbs 19, just a few minutes ago, we read this idea of the idle person will suffer hunger. Now we've got these two ideas tied together, idle chatter. So this is not productive talk and conversation. This is just avoiding work by talking. Surely nobody's ever seen this, right? Okay. I'm the only one who's ever seen this happen. Perfect. That's good. Another problem is no motivation. Now, it's possible for people to have too much motivation or too much ambition, or, as I've put on here, misguided ambition. They are eager for the wrong things. But having no ambition or no motivation can also be a problem. If you don't want anything, if you're not trying to accomplish anything, where's the drive to do anything? It's just not there. So, Proverbs 19, back to that. Proverbs 19, verse 24. And this is similar to what we read just a minute ago. A little bit different wording. Proverbs 19:24 says, "A lazy man buries his hand in the bowl and will not so much as bring it to his mouth again." He's not motivated. He's got the food in hand. He's stuck his hand down in the bowl, and there it sits. Have you ever known people that go through life like that? Turn a few pages over, Proverbs 26:15. Proverbs 26:15. So this is same scene, but a little bit different take on it. Proverbs 26:15 says, "The lazy man buries his hand in the bowl." Well, that sounds familiar. We just read that. But now it says, "It wearies him to bring it back to his mouth." It's just too much work to do the basic task of feeding yourself. That's an utter lack of motivation. It wearies him to bring it back to his mouth. Any thoughts or comments before we go to number 4? I'm trying to put off number 4. All right. I'll see now the clicker won't work. Perfect. There it went. Number 4 is procrastination. So you guys wanting to put off number? Yeah. Never do today what can be put off till tomorrow. Or I'll procrastinate when I get around to it. That's one of my favorites. I'll procrastinate when I get around to it. So, we don't have a verse that goes along with this one, but we've seen this in our lives as well. This is another way that people avoid work. They may even fully intend to do it eventually. I'll get around to that. I used to have this little thing on my desk. It was wood. It was called a round to it. And when somebody said, I'll get around to it, I would hand it to them. And I don't have it anymore. So you can see how that went over with some folks. But this idea of I'll eventually get to the work. And it may be that you need the motivation to build up, or whatever. People procrastinate for all kinds of different reasons. So these 4 things that we talked about, some of these can stem from too much comfort, maybe too easy access to communication. So the person who talks, for example, if they can't find somebody to talk with, well, our technology today, you can talk to anybody anywhere in the world anytime you want to now. So you don't just have to find somebody sitting in the office there with you to talk to, or somebody on the job site that you can walk up to and talk to. You can sit there and text, you can sit on the computer, you can call somebody on the phone, all kinds of different ways. So our culture, our technology, a lot of these things help contribute to some of these. And so it's easy to think, oh, well, I don't feel that I'm lazy. Well, maybe you're not, and I hope you're not, and that's great. But we also have to recognize that there are things around us in our environment that can help contribute to that. So we just need to be aware of it and on guard for that, so that we don't fall into these traps. Because we don't want to be the person that God's talking about with our hands stuck down in the bowl, and we're just too lazy to do anything with it. May it never be said that that's us. But that's the warning. Yes, sir.
Another problem we have is society enables people to be lazy.
Mm-hmm.
We pay you more not to work than we do to go to work. When McDonald's is paying people $20 an hour and can't get them to come to work because the government's paying them $377 a week not to go to work. What's the incentive?
Mm-hmm.
I need money.
Yeah, so we have all these different situations that come up in society. People are able to take advantage of different things. We have all kinds of avenues that people can just avoid doing work.
This goes way back. I can't remember all the details, but I studied it once. But when the Pilgrims arrived, they first had communal property. And they didn't own their plots, they shared. Well, basically what happened, William Bradford was the governor, and of course what happened is the people who were working and making their bread and so forth, and the others who were, you work and cook and make this bread and I'll eat it. That was what was happening with a certain percentage of the other people. And the whole deal was falling apart until they, of course they had to appeal to England and things like this, but they finally got permission to have private property. So when each person got their plot, they did not have to share with those that dissension had arisen, because many were taking advantage of the communal, not pulling their weight. So it's kind of the principle that we're talking about here, that even the very first, foundings
Mm-hmm.
here suffered from that situation. And once people got private property and the right to, they would still, obviously, would share with others and things like that, but the ones who didn't want to work were messing things up.
Yeah, I think many of us can relate to a very similar situation. Who remembers in school group work? What would happen with group work in so many cases? One or two people, somebody would do the work, right? It's a real group, right? Yeah, they would do the work, but everybody else gets the same grade. Yeah. Yeah, and people come up with all kinds of different ways to try to fix this problem with group work and improve that, but it's still there.
They were giving us a valuable lesson in society.
But have we learned it?
A lot of society hasn't learned.
Right.
We at least learned what we were going
Yeah, but I mean, we all laugh about this and we know this, and yet we keep doing it. You know, we collectively as a society, like you said, society hasn't learned this. You know, it's very interesting to me. I work on a college campus, and so I hear this all the time because we always have student workers, and every time they get group work, they're just fussing about it because we tend to hire the folks that I guess we're just lucky. We hire the ones that tend to be the ones doing the work because they're fussing about everybody else not doing the work. So it's just interesting to me. We keep this idea of group work going. We're going to avoid that at all costs. We'll put that off till tomorrow. It's the gift that keeps on giving. All right. So let's look at some traits then of the lazy. 2 traits of the lazy. So what we're going to find is that lazy people tend to share some common characteristics. One of them is full of excuses. For every reason to work, there are 2 not to work. And Proverbs has some things to say about this. So let's return to Proverbs. We're now in chapter 20, so back a few pages from a moment ago. Proverbs 20, verse 4. It says, "The lazy man will not plow because of winter. He will beg during harvest and have nothing." Well, that goes along with this idea we were talking about very early on in this discussion, you know, the climate control and that kind of thing. Oh, it's cold outside. You know, I don't want to be out in the cold and working and plowing. You know, that's not for me, or I'll do that later. You know, when the work needs to be done, here we have an excuse. To what result? Having to beg during the harvest. They didn't put in the work when the work was needed to build the foundation for success later on. And there are so many worldly and spiritual applications for that lesson alone. You've got to do the work early and often to be able to get the rewards. Turn over a few pages, Proverbs 22, verse 13. Here's another one of my favorites. I may start using this one at work. Proverbs 22, verse 13. "The lazy man says, 'There's a lion outside. I shall be slain in the streets.'" I'm going to use that tomorrow and see how that goes over. There's a lion outside. So maybe there is a lion outside. Could be real. But in this context, it looks like this is just an excuse, right? So there's a lion outside. Danger is everywhere in life. Anything could happen to us at any time. Now, I'm not saying just go full bore into whatever, heedless of danger, but there are plenty of people that will use ridiculous concerns as a means to avoid doing whatever it is that they need to do. Now, there are plenty of things that we're afraid of and plenty of things that give us pause in doing work. But let's not let the ridiculous cause us to not work. And then Proverbs 26, verse 16, a few pages over. This is a good one to highlight. Proverbs 26, 16. It says, "The lazy man is wiser in his own eyes than 7 men who can answer sensibly." How wise is he? Well, in his own eyes, that's not very wise at all. But in his own eyes, he's wiser than 7 men who can answer sensibly. So he comes up with reasons to do or not do whatever that it is, and he's able to reason through this. And he's wise. Oh, man, I've got this figured out. I'm not going to do this because of this, and I'm going to avoid that because of this. And he's got it all figured out. Yet the end result is he's just being lazy. So full of excuses is trait number 1 of lazy people. Any thoughts on that?
When you look at that, a prudent man will do what he has to do to go right for himself and his family. Lying or not, he'll go out there and kill it when he has to.
Mm-hmm.
That's the person we want to be.
Yeah. So let's say that the lion is real. Well, if the lion has moved in, you can't spend your entire life inside the house because eventually you're going to starve. So that's an excellent point. So even if the lion is real, we have to take action. We have to take work. And think of the spiritual applications of that. We look around in the world, we see all this work that needs to be done in the name of God, and yet how often do people talk about God and they get shamed for it, and society punishes them for it? The lion, that lion, is real and is out there, and we don't need to let that keep us from God's work. Any other thoughts? All right. Trait number 2. Lazy people tend to waste or neglect what they have. So how much work has been invented because proper care was not taken in the first place? Putting oil in your car, for example. That's an easy one for us to think of. What other things happen in society that if we did the work up front, we wouldn't have to do the later work? Changing your oil. What else? Yes, sir.
Making our income tax payments on a timely basis.
Yeah, okay, right. Yeah, pay your income taxes a timely manner. 1, you risk jail time. Number 2, going through an audit, there's a painful process.
There's also interest
Penalties, yeah.
Then you got to pay your CPA extra.
So they would encourage this. Yeah, great example. Great example. What else?
Change your air conditioning for
Changing filters, yeah, just the basic maintenance on your filter. You take it out and you're like, wow, how's this thing even breathing still? That is not the way you want to operate. I was just thinking, cleaning out your fridge. Clean it out before it grows hair, right? Man, sometimes you open that fridge and you're like, man, why did I not throw that out earlier? Because now, it's a mess. Anything else?
Like the old saying, ounce of prevention worth a pound of cure.
Absolutely. Yes, the ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. It's the exact same concept. If we will put in the effort when it is needed, we can stave off all kinds of invented work. Work we wouldn't have to do at all. But when we don't do that, now we're often forced to do this extra work. And if you really are lazy, that's really the worst punishment, right? Because now you have to do more work, and you could have just avoided it.
I think of Abraham Lincoln, who said, if I had 4 hours to chop down a tree, I'd spend the first 3 hours sharpening the axe.
Yeah. Get your tools in order. Take care of your tools. Mm-hmm.
So there's a spiritual responsibility for us to be faithful to our individual households, provide, take care of.
Yeah, and we see examples of that throughout Scripture, not only taking care of our household, taking care of the household of faith, taking care of ourselves, If I have not taken care of myself, how can I do God's work and take care of others and everybody else who is in need, because I've neglected the very foundation of what I need to be able to provide? We're putting that off till tomorrow, remember. So let's see in Proverbs some examples here. Proverbs chapter 12. So turning back several pages now. Proverbs 12 and verse 27. Proverbs 12:27. It says, "The lazy man does not roast what he took in hunting, but diligence is man's precious possession." All right, so if you hunt, you kill something, but you don't cook it, it's going to spoil. Yeah, so imagine all our hunters out here. You kill a deer, and okay, well, I'm hungry, and you take a bit of it and you cook that up, but you don't take care of the rest of it. You get this huge animal that could have fed you for quite some time, but now it spoils, and what do you have to do? You got to go hunt again. Well, again, our hunters among us, how easy is it to kill a deer? Do you get one every single time you go out? Of course not. Of course not. You're just making it harder. So when you have the thing before you, if you take time to prepare, put in that effort, you don't waste it, you don't neglect it. It says that diligence is man's precious possession. Being diligent. Turn over a couple of pages. Proverbs 18, verse 9. Proverbs 18 and verse 9. It says, "He who is slothful in his work is a brother to him who is a great destroyer." So we've got a relationship here. We're saying the person who is slothful or lazy, they're in the family of someone who just destroys. Because the end result is the same. If you're not doing the right amount of work, the right amount of effort, if you're letting it be wasted or neglected, you might as well just be destroying it. You're in the same neighborhood, it says. You're the brother to the destroyer because you're just letting it go to waste by being lazy or slothful. All right, now Proverbs 24, verses 30 and 31. Proverbs 24, 30 and 31. It says, "I went by the field of the lazy man, and by the vineyard of the man devoid of understanding. And there it was, all overgrown with thorns. Its surface was covered with nettles, its stone wall was broken down." We mentioned gardening earlier. Gardening is very, very hard, tedious work. You got to get the field all plowed up. You've got to plant everything. But just because you got all the weeds out of the way and you put the plants in that you wanted, it doesn't end there. Those who have gardened, you know, those weeds, what do? They just keep coming back. Well, you could look at it and say, well, I've already pulled weeds. You know, I've done that this year. I'm done with that. And just let them grow. But what happens if you do that? It chokes out the plant. Absolutely. So it's competing for the resources for the thing that you're wanting to grow. You know, we have the example here of the nettles and things like that. So even if it doesn't kill the plant, have you ever tried to untangle things like green beans and stuff from among weeds and tall grass and that kind of stuff? You're just making it harder for yourself to gather because you didn't take the effort when the grass was, or the weeds were really small and tiny and you could get rid of them. Now it's all grown up and you've made an absolute mess. So a wonderful example here again of don't neglect what you have. Don't waste what you have. You've got to put the effort in early on. So a running theme we have here is the idea of doing the work when the work is necessary, because we know down the road it's going to pay off. Yes, sir. Okay? Read them if you would.
When I saw, I reflected upon it. I looked and received instruction. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest. Then your poverty will come as a robber, and your want like an armed man.
Yeah, so that goes back, and we read that last verse there earlier. So again, we have this idea that it comes upon you, and it just kind of slips up on you. You don't put in the work, and all of a sudden, here is the robber, here is the armed man who is taking from you everything. All right, so we are wrapped up for tonight. Now, next week, I want to put a little teaser in your minds because I like this section. We're going to be talking next week about cultivating lazy fruit. So think about that for the next week.